Hello and welcome to this, another edition of the Crypto Club and Digital Assets Weekly Catch-Up on Zoom. It is Sunday, the 25th of May, 2025. Bitcoin nearly smashed through a new all-time high of $112,000 a few days ago. So we'll see if Bitcoin is a subject we talk about today. The reality is these sessions are driven by the audience, so we end up talking about crypto, blockchain, DeFi, NFTs, ICOs, STOs, all sorts of three-letter acronyms. We sometimes talk about different security models, layer one, layer two solutions. We also get to discuss things like central bank digital currencies and stablecoins as well. So with that, let's see who's going to come join us today. Stuart, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Gary, or good afternoon, whatever it is.
So what else is going on in the world at the moment then? I noticed Bitcoin last few days, nearly hit
Frothy.
$112,000.
Yeah.
So sure.
Very frothy.
Yeah. And the thing I always find interesting, as much as I don't actually think that crypto prices are important in their own right, what they do is whenever prices go up, it draws attention. So it always hits the mainstream press. It always gets some airtime, that kind of thing, which gets more people interested in it. So I like crypto prices simply because of the froth, as you say, that there is, but also it does generate some awareness at times, particularly when it goes up and hits a new all-time high, or it retracts and people say, oh, the market's collapsing and it's all dying off, even though it's only like a 10 or 15% drop, which in crypto land is a normal day trading type thing. So
Do we know why it is increasing this time?
So I have a theory, and the theory holds true for every time crypto prices change rapidly, that there is this butterfly which is in the Amazon, and it flapped its wings, and that through the laws of interrelatedness just caused, through chaos theory, caused the price to change. And the great thing is that as crazy as that might sound, it's every bit as credible as any other theory anyone's got. So it could have been to do with the US government. Maybe Trump posted something. I don't even know these days. Maybe BlackRock took out a position. Maybe it was, I seem to remember one of the big consultancies saying something about Bitcoin was going to hit $1 million or something. I think that was a week or so back. Could be any of these things, or it could be none of them. Could be just a few whales who are manipulating the market in some way. We never really know. So your guess is every bit as valid as anyone else's, Annie.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Actually, because there's not too many of us, I do have a question for Stuart for a long, long time now, because in one of these meetings that we were in, I remember you challenged Richard regarding Polkadot. So I'm kind of curious. So from your experience, which supplier would you say, you would much prefer? It would be great to know, your understanding as to how you see that particular supplier.
I'm not going to talk on any particular blockchain. All I'll say is that the blockchains out there at the moment do not support their version 1 to version 1.5 of an ongoing evolution of blockchain. None of them support composability. None of them support more than track and trace from one place to another. There's no killer app out there because businesses can't use it without composability. The company that I was working for up to a couple of weeks ago is trying to put that together. They've been working on it for an awful long time. The software is done, the chain is done, but they haven't added on all the features, multi-sig and so on yet. That will come out later in the summer.
Stuart, what do you mean by composability? Maybe for those who aren't familiar with that.
The ability to put things together. If this happens, that happens. To be able to write to two different things at the same time, to be able to be integrated with common apps such as Oracle, NetSuite, and so on. None of the apps at the moment with the smart contract, as far as I'm aware, allow that.
Okay. So maybe we've got an opportunity. Ken's joined as well, and I know Ken's doing work around building on the Ethereum protocol. Ken, any thoughts on what Stuart was just saying about composability?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with what he says about that. I mean, I myself can't think of any blockchain that does it 100%. What you have is people do what can I say, a semi attempt at it, but nobody's doing it really at the moment. Nothing, I mean, unless you can think of one, I can't think of any.
I think it comes back again to, I've been seeing this over, 12 years or so now. It's about thinking of applications and capabilities like Lego bricks that you can plug together and that kind of thing. But in order to be able to do that, you need interoperability. And to do that, you need standards. The reason that Lego bricks are so flexible and so amazing is because they are designed to plug into each other. And that's the thing where the likes of Polkadot and ChainLink and that. Yeah. So this is where Polkadot and ChainLink and a few others have always argued are at the intersection of a really great opportunity of providing that kind of interoperability layer, because maybe rather than having blockchain A being interoperable with blockchain B, C, D, E, and whatever, what you need is kind of like an orchestration layer. So, in traditional IT, you talk about ESBs or enterprise service buses. So a bus architecture is kind of like the idea. Imagine
it's a mess.
It's what? Sorry,
it's a mess.
Yes, it is. But the principle is quite good.
No, it's a very limited principle, Gary. Having no composability, sharding for scalability, none of these networks have it. They have to go to a layer 2 network. The moment you go to a layer 2, you've lost really the security of a blockchain, because most of the layer 2s are centralized, not decentralized. And so that's what I'm saying. We're at phase 1 to 1.5. We're not at phase 2 or release 2 of blockchain. And Ethereum have been trying to get there. And they're not getting there. I don't see how they can, knowing their code, the way they operate, and so on. We've actually got a demo, or I'll say Prasaga has got a demo of multi-sharding running on multiple nodes, and you can bring it up and watch it. But it's not complete yet. And one of the issues that they have is resource. At the moment, they've run out of resource, and I'll stop at that point.
That's a not uncommon thing with startups, isn't it? That they run out of the runway in some way. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, Annie, you were going to ask.
No, I was just going to say, so it sounds like as if, everybody is building the blockchain from scratch.
No, what's happening is that most people are building on Ethereum. They're spurring off of Ethereum, so it's an EVM type chain. So they're not building it from scratch. They're doing it and putting their own little twists and bobbles on it, but it's still an Ethereum chain, and it still uses the Ethereum architecture. We built one from scratch, and that was a huge undertaking. It's taken probably about 5 years.
Yes, I would think so, because you would also build the substrate. So when you use from Ethereum, does that mean you use it on top of the substrate layer, whatever they call the substrate layer?
Yeah, whatever they want to call it. Yeah, we've got nothing in common with Ethereum at all.
But Ken, what you're doing, are you building it as a fork off Ethereum?
No.
No, I'm
Ken is. Sorry. Ken, yeah. Let me mute.
Oh, yeah. So we're basically doing research on the Ethereum, the layer 1, basically trying to bring sharding onto it.
Okay.
But the Ethereum Foundation's main focus at the moment is to basically make layer 2s. I mean, their focus is to bring more layer 2s rather than work on sharding. So they're just going to continue doing the thing about sharding, though. I'm not sure it's a good solution anyway for the staking blockchain. It's probably better for non-stake blockchain than it is for staking. So the decision to go staking as well complicates a lot of things with regards to sharding on EVM, basically EVM blockchains. You do have a few who've gone out there and have built sharding on their EVMs, but it comes up, it's what you give up. You give up decentralization. So a few that have gone out and say, "Oh yeah, look at us, we can do sharding." Yeah, but you're not decentralized. So it's what of the three do you give up? Do you give up your security, decentralization, or your speed, or whatever? And yeah, so that's the trade-off at the moment. And I think the way the Ethereum Foundation are looking at things, they are really pushing towards layer twos, because that's how they think they can grow and make Ethereum even more decentralized. I mean, the thinking is that they'll get the security from the layer one, which is true only to a certain point, because all layer twos have their, in fact, Base did an article. I mean, it was kind of what can I say? I mean, the title was pretty much a clickbait title, so I ended up reading it. And the title was, because they put their newsletters on Mirror, the blockchain kind of thing. And so when I saw that, I said, "Oh, let me read that." The title was "Great News, We Are Getting Even More Decentralized." And when you just basically read it, the Security Council, whatever they call it, I think it was the 10 people, 12 people who basically hold the keys, I think they're expanding it to 15. So that's where the biggest bottleneck is with all layer twos, is that problem. And they can't resolve that, because if you resolve that, you just have to go back to being a layer one. You end up with the same technical issues as a layer one. So, but Ethereum basically seems to think the more layer twos they can get on Ethereum, the more people can get used to using EVMs, and it could basically make their token more decentralized. And by that, they'll end up resolving in the future the issue with regards to the speed of the blockchain. That's the thinking at the moment, but we'll see how that works out. But even the latest upgrade that they did was more like it's kind of like going, when you go from a version 3.2 to 3.201, there was absolutely nothing. It was just making some of the code maybe easier to read, but there was nothing really to write home about. It's solving a couple of bugs. And yeah, so the biggest upgrade was the 2021, I think it was. No, 2021, 2020.
2023, wasn't it?
Was it 23?
Or wasn't it when they switched to proof of stake?
The proof of stake 23. Yeah, that was the biggest upgrade. Everything else has not really done anything. They've done a couple to make to give more sort of speed for layer twos, make them faster, but those were already in the pipeline even before. And so it was just a matter of doing enough testing to ensure that when you implement it, it's not going to fall apart. So that's the situation with.
I thought it was interesting as well. I saw an article a few days ago where it's talking about Vitalik's vision for Ethereum, and you usually
can't see anything big coming out with you.
Right.
Ken, you're cutting in and out, Ken.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can see.
Yeah, you're dropping out a bit.
Are you actually saying something earlier? Could you please repeat?
I think we may have lost him for a moment. No, never mind. I'll share this instead, which was someone wrote an article about what Vitalik was writing about on X about his visions, and it's interesting that at least he talks about layer one being improved, which I think is a good thing. And then the standard things about like transaction confirmation, yeah, absolutely that. Improve the core engine. So this is the EVM. He wants to improve it, but fine, doesn't really go into what that exactly means apart from better scaling. Reducing storage, yeah, it's no bad thing, but making it stateless might be a big big change, and enhance security and resilience. So certainly,
yeah, that's the wrong way to go.
Things.
Making it stateless.
You reckon that's the wrong way to go?
I think that's the wrong way to go. I think they're digging themselves into yet another hole.
Mm.
I mean, I'm waiting for Ethereum to announce layer threes to join together layer twos, to sit on top of them. And what they're digging is a bigger and bigger hole. And that's their choice. It's a
Right.
technical choice between, Betamax and VHF, basically.
And I think that's the good thing about it, though, that even if we may disagree with the technology vision or roadmap or direction, I think it's actually good that it's taking a different direction, because what you don't want is for everyone to go running in exactly the same way, because you don't discover what's actually the best thing there. So yeah, we shall see where it goes. Ken, have you managed to rejoin us again?
Yeah, I think I don't know what happened, but I think my basically connection just fell off.
Well, welcome back. I think you were answering something that Annie didn't quite pick up on. You just dropping in and out. I don't know if you can remember what it was you were saying that you could repeat.
No, just talking about Ethereum's general roadmap. They've got nothing to do really about improving the speed of the confirmations on the layer one. Most of it is making improvements that will actually make layer twos work much better.
Because it's interesting. I've always argued that as soon as you go to a layer two, that means that you've not got confidence in your layer one in some way. Sorry, Annie, you're about to ask again.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, it's just that this is a very unusual small group for me to ask more technical questions.
Go for it.
I
Go for
think
Go for it, Annie.
thank you, Ken, for that explanation just now. But when you mentioned decentralized, I'm just trying to think. So, for example, right now we would say so anything to do with cloud, let's say cloud software, for example, with AWS EC2. So you can say, oh, the pricing is being controlled by Amazon, right? So we can say, oh, it's too expensive or something, right? Now, my point is it ever decentralized when it goes into blockchain, because somebody would be in control of the component that you wanted, whether that is called the core or whatever it is that you want to call it, as part of the things that you need for the blockchain. And somebody is going to be in control of that pricing.
Not
If it is,
necessarily. Not necessarily, Annie. They're starting to build their own data centers. So they're getting away from AWS. The AWS solution is for smaller companies
I know,
and to get fast geographic coverage.
yes,
If you're thinking big, then you're going to be looking at a $3 billion data center. But most of the chains don't generate that type of money to do that at the moment.
exactly. And because they don't generate that type of money to do that, is it not more expensive for someone who is trying to get, a core component, and they want to subscribe to it? It's almost like it's identical
No,
to
look,
something from
Annie,
AWS, but from a blockchain.
you're getting confused. AWS worldwide.
Yeah,
That is what is called decentralization. It's a geographic term. It doesn't always mean that it's not with AWS. AWS can leverage that, obviously, but the pricing in different countries is not compatible.
but
You go
I'm
to
not
India,
meaning,
you go to...
yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
but
Explain it to me.
it's not to do with AWS necessarily. What I'm trying to do here is more like, the supplier of the blockchain. They're obviously smaller. They're not as distributed as AWS can be in many different geographical locations in order to make the pricing lower down. So if we want to have like a core, because of the blockchain that we are trying to build, or parachain, or whatever you call it, that we are trying to build on top
Any
of,
chain.
yeah, any chain,
Yeah.
right? So that any chain is controlled by a supplier, right? If it is Ethereum, so is Ethereum controlling the price?
No.
No. No,
It's the demand
Gary,
and
do you want
supply
to
that's
have a go?
controlling it. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to. First of all, it's generally. I think you may be at risk of mixing up a few concepts. First of all,
Yeah.
I see this quite often, that people mixed up distributed computing with decentralization, which is one thing to begin with, and also they think that if everything's running on AWS, that means it's not decentralized because it's all part of AWS. Decentralization relates to the governance of the blockchain, not the operation of it. So if you had it where all of the miners, for example, on Bitcoin, if all the miners were running on AWS, even then, that does not mean that AWS controls the blockchain. It means that AWS facilitates it, but it doesn't control it, because it's what the actual miners do that make the difference. So I see a lot where people mix up distribution, which is the physically distributed around the world type thing. Even if it's all on AWS, then that can still be distributed, as in it's spread around. The decentralization.
I'm just trying to see if there is a way I can put like a side-by-side thing here. Maybe it's not quite directly side by side. Okay, so then if you try to purchase a core from say Polkadot, who is in control of the
what do you mean
pricing?
by core? What do you mean by core? Are we talking of
Do you mean like a node?
web server, a node? What are you talking of?
It's probably more like a node, but the point is somebody is in
Okay.
control of that pricing, isn't it? It's never completely decentralized.
Yeah, that's usually the Ethereum, which is obviously centralized, or the Ethereum foundation, which is theoretically representing the members of Ethereum. But the people on the foundation's board or that assignment are going to make decisions on behalf of all members, although there is a voting right there. The idea is that if you wanted to run a node on your laptop, Annie, you could run a node on your laptop. I could run one. Gary could run one. Is that distributed? It's yes or no. I'm in the States.
I
You're
don't
in
think so.
Cambridge.
It depends on whether we all have a node from the same company, right?
Right. If we're all, let's say we all buy Ethereum node. We've just come. Grandma's died and left us a lot of money. We bought an Ethereum node. We've got the local service provider who's connected, bringing you internet service, is controlling something. You're controlling the node. You're then connecting on the internet via an ISP, and that ISP is routing over their internal network that they have chosen, not you, to get to other nodes such as me and Gary. Now, I'm using, say Comcast or T-Mobile as a supplier for my internet. And Gary's using BT, for example. It's not distributed computing because the computing takes place at your place. It is then validated by other nodes on the network, and they may be anywhere in the world. But it's not true distributed computing, because distributed computing implies that the database is mirrored in different locations. And that's not quite what happens with the blockchain, because you validate a transaction, then it goes out as a completed transaction to the databases to update everyone else, so you don't get double spend and things like that. So who's controlling it? You've got many, many suppliers that have their own way of pricing, controlling the service, throttling the service, and so on. How would you look at that? What's your reaction to that?
Well, that is what I mean, right? If it says decentralized, it's how can it actually ever be decentralized completely? So they talk about, Web3 being different from Web
Okay,
2.
let me
So
explain
why
a
would it
different way.
be any
I'll answer
different then?
Okay.
the decentralization question is generally to do with the data. So if you go back to Satoshi's white paper, the two main themes that he ran with were one, getting rid of the middleman. He talked about the banks being the middleman, and that's why you have the he designed a system where anybody can join the network, and then the first person gets a reward, and then you have a ledger. Now, the decentralization of that network and that ledger is the important thing. So if I make a transaction today on, let's say, AWS, okay, and my data is on there, they could cut me off tomorrow and I would not have access to that. And they would be the only one who control it, just like your bank account. Your bank can cut you off and you will not have access to your account to see what you spend, what you spent 2-3 years ago. You won't have that. But with the blockchain, because it's decentralized, that database is held by so many different people. So even if your supplier cuts you off, you can still get a copy of that database, because there's always going to be somebody else somewhere there who's got a node with the same database. So it's the two things he was trying to do was get rid of the middlemen, the banks, and also distribution. Decentralization was all about censorship resistance. So, and that's why the ability for everybody to have a copy of that database is so important. And that's why you also had the big issue with regards to the size of Bitcoin in the early days. Should we make it faster by making increasing the Bitcoin size? Yeah, and and that's where Bitcoin Cash came, because Bitcoin Cash, whether people said we should, and the core Bitcoiners said no, we shouldn't. But the ethos is still the same. They both, regardless of which network you go, there's always going to be somebody somewhere with that database. Whereas if let's say with your bank account, it's only your bank who owns it. Let's say you've got some data held on AWS. Let's say you've got, I don't know, your songwriter, your book writer, and all your books are on that AWS. And AWS then, for some reason, block you from getting access to those books that you've been writing. There's nothing you can do. That's it. And that's the main difference, and that's the solution. Sorry, not the solution, the problem that Web3 is trying to resolve. It's you being able to access your data, and your data not being able to be censored by anybody. And that's the goal. And that's why decentralization is so important, because if you have centralization, it's the choke point that that people can go to and say a good thing. It's like Tornado Cash, which was a mixer. So they were I don't know if the guy's still in prison or not, but essentially the government were telling them to basically close down, and they were like, look, this is decentralized, we can't. So essentially threw them in jail. They then put the actual address on the OFAC, which is basically a sanctions list. So any American citizen, or I'm not sure about Europe, but definitely American citizens, were not allowed to interact with it. And then they took the domain name was also taken off. But you could still get access, you could still use it. So even though it was an OFAC, it was like, in terms of usage, you're still being used quite a lot, because people who are outside, who lived outside the US or outside the West, in China's and in a lot of the Asian countries, were still using it. All they did was just build a new front end with a different name, and were still able to interact. As long as you have your keys, that's it. And then obviously that created a lot of problems, because you have, they'll go out there, take this ETH, but then this ETH sort of like, what can I say, black ETH. So, if somebody gives you that ETH, and then you end up sending that ETH to, let's say, a centralized exchange, I don't know what they'll do. I think they'll either not accept it, or they'll just I don't know what it was, but there's a blacklist of certain ETH that they wouldn't accept. But in terms of actually blocking it, there was no way for the government to block it. So it's there. It's no longer, ever since I think Trump came in and he removed it from the OFAC list. So you can use it, but the demand for it, obviously, it's not there. Again, because it's a mixing service as well, it's one of those things that works well if a lot of people use it, and doesn't really work well if not a lot of people use it. So I don't think it's getting that much usage at the moment, because over time people have moved on. But the ethos of it being distributed right across the world meant there was no one person who could shut it down. Even today, there's a lot of people who have a lot of ETH still sitting there, but just won't touch it because they're like, oh, well, we'll just, wait and see, because, it's people prefer freedom. Let's put it that way. So the way they got the government got people on that was by using, once people said, like, look, they threw the founders to jail. Most people, normal people who just basically just want to live a normal life, looked at it and thought, well, I'm just going to stay away from that. But in the technology, the assets, everything is still there and it's still accessible. Anybody with their own, whoever used it, still has their own private keys, can go on there and can interact, can take up their ETH, they had their own token, I can't remember what it's called, can still use it. It's still up there, and that's the main difference. Talking about AWS, there is that, I think it's Arweave is one of them. There's two prominent blockchains that are trying to resolve that issue of having your data. One of them is doing it saying you have to pay over a certain period of time, and one of them, if you put your data on there, is permanent. Again, they're trying to build on that kind of decentralization. Will it work if it's decentralized? So going back to my example of the book, so if you put your book there and it's permanently there, there's no way that anybody can stop you from getting access to your book. There's a story of a famous professor from the US who went to China to give a lecture, and he had this book on his Amazon, and he was going to basically refer to it on his lecture there. And when he turned up, he couldn't have access to it because the book was geo-ringed. So as soon as he hit China, because it was on the banned list or whatever in China or something, I don't know what it was, but it was geolocated. And so a book that he'd paid for and he thought it was his, it turns out he couldn't access it in China. So those are the kind of things that decentralization tries to resolve.
Annie, can I just ask, because you kept mentioning pricing earlier on, so could you just explain what you're thinking around that? Because maybe we're answering a different question to the one that you're actually asking.
Yeah, you probably, but also it's quite interesting as well with what Ken was saying. So basically, if I just use what you have mentioned earlier, the fact that you build on Ethereum. So what you're saying is, okay, so if you build your blockchain project, whatever it is that you build on Ethereum, what you're saying is your data will be permanently accessible. Is it because it's permanently accessible because Ethereum allowed it? So let's say Ethereum one day gone away, doesn't exist anymore for whatever reason.
It's immutable. It's immutable on the nodes that were connected in the database. Now, if AWS goes away, then your data goes away.
That's what I would have thought.
If it's only AWS, but this is why you use multiple suppliers around the world, so that it doesn't all go away, and people run their own nodes as well, and they have copies of it.
Yeah.
And it's worth throwing into the mix here. What you're talking about is cloud computing when you talk about AWS. And one of the reasons that people think that cloud computing is good for is because of its reliability. And typically, I think AWS is probably, its uptime is 99.99%.
Yeah, exactly. It's the highest.
Yeah, which is awful. Yeah. If you think what 99.99% means in terms of how many minutes per year the service isn't up, it's surprisingly high. You actually work out how many days there are in the year and
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, there's a calculator online you can use for that, actually.
And so this is why if you're actually designing a resilient system, what you'll typically do is you'll have it on AWS and something like Azure and possibly Google and possibly whatever, depending upon how much resilience you want.
That is what most company would do. Yes, exactly.
Well, no, it's what most companies say they'll do, and it's what most companies don't do a lot of the time
because of the cost.
Yeah,
the company that I know, they do that.
Yeah.
It is for sure. It is.
A lot of them in the banking sector certainly do. A lot of them in other sectors say they do, and they actually don't. They actually host it all on AWS and cross the fingers that it's always going to be available. But all it needs is for a couple of nodes. If all the AWS-based blockchain things went offline, but there were a couple of nodes that still existed that were running on Azure, for example, or even on a dedicated laptop or whatever, then it's always recoverable. It's always bringing back.
Yeah, let's do it this way. Okay, use the Ethereum example then. Okay, let's say the blockchain is built on Ethereum. Okay, so many years down the line, there can be a risk that Ethereum might not exist for whatever reason, right? And then we want to say, okay, actually, it is still accessible somehow because it's immutable, right? Is it because the data doesn't necessarily sit in Ethereum? It could be sitting somewhere else, and that's why the immutable is actually real, because it is not just Ethereum that can access it. So we have the private key still.
So again, it comes back to the architecture and the design of the solution, but it is not generally considered good practice to put your data on a blockchain. Okay, what you do is you use your blockchain as effectively a register of the keys and of the encryption and everything.
The hash values.
Yeah, correct. Exactly right. So you always use the blockchain as the means of access to the data, and you'll use something like Swarm or what's the one I love the name of? Ken, you'll know this. What's the mass distribution capability that you've got, which people in Ethereum use a lot of? You've got Swarm, and you've got the global compute one, which name escapes me at the moment.
So where do you put the data then?
You put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
You put it on a distributed system, which isn't a blockchain.
Right. Okay. So the data,
here's what you do,
would go where AWS, Google, and Azure is.
Potentially, or you could have it on a local laptop if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's very, very expensive to keep data on chain. Because of the amount of data. So what you do is you typically have what they call a hash value, which is a computed algorithm that refers to where the data is or what the data is. And you store that offline. Now, the question is, how long do you keep it online versus offline? Because some subsequent transactions need to get to certain data that's fresh. Now, if I've got an NFT, I don't want to keep that online because I'm going to get charged for the storage. And I'm probably going to look at that in 5 years and decide to sell it in 5 years. But if I keep the keys, the hash value, everything else to access it, somewhere it's there. And it's stored maybe on 150 to 1,500, even more locations around the world on various storage. And eventually I will be paying for that. I will go in there. The retrieval is not going to be instantaneous. And that's one of the other things that is coming down the turnpike, to use an American expression, is that when you want to access data that's not often accessed, how long are you willing to wait for it to be retrieved? Gary has an article, right?
Yeah,
I know.
exactly. And it's exactly the kind of thing that in computing you talk about, whether you keep it on chain, whether you keep it off chain, what's the balancing, what's the cost of it, what's the cost of storage, all this kind of thing comes into it.
I know, and then the thing is, we wanted to say it's immutable. So if it sits with AWS, and one day, like you say, most company would just sit with AWS, and then
Yeah,
one day AWS went away. What
that's why
happened to it?
that's why you never have it with all of your nodes on a single technology. The same argument could be you're only running the nodes on Windows-based environments. Well, what happens if Windows disappears one day? You really need some running on Linux as well, or whatever else. So yeah, you never ever put everything within the one thing.
Right, it's like
And yet
storing
people,
it on 5-inch floppy disks.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, go on, Ken.
This is go on, Ken.
Yeah, I'm a bit back. My internet today is really bad.
And that's the problem of having a single internet provider.
Yeah, well, I'm
Proving most of
traveling. I'm
this.
actually not at home, so I'm having to use the hotel internet.
Mm.
But I mean, just talking about the like AWS. Like I did mention Arweave before. So Arweave, they're trying to build their own AWS. I think they run it on IFPS. I'm not sure, but
Right.
basically,
IFPS was what I was trying to remember before. So yeah, IPFS, in fact. So
IPFS. Yes.
yeah,
So
that's what I love. Any quick one, IPFS. If you don't know, it's Interplanetary File Store or File System. Sorry, thank you, Ken, for reminding me on that.
yeah, so
So
it's supposed to basically be a decentralized version. So you put your data on there, and the way your data is stored, it's you have all these nodes. Anybody who runs the nodes gets paid to store your data, but your data is not just basically stored in one node; it's duplicated across several nodes. So if one node goes offline, it doesn't matter. You've got your keys, and you can open your data with a different node. It's like I said, I haven't used it at all, but it does get a lot of, every time you go to a conference, you do get a lot of people talking about it. It gets a lot of basically a lot of good things said about it. But yeah, it's a cost element, I think, that is why people aren't using it a lot at the moment. And also it's slow. So if you ever go to any website that has that, then yeah, be prepared to just because we might be thinking, because we're spoiled. I mean, we used of going to a website, of going there and just getting things straight away. But with them, you probably, you're looking sitting there for about maybe 30, half a minute, waiting for your stuff to come out, and it feels as if you're going back in time. And that's the main issue I think people aren't using. But if you want to store something over the long term that you're not going to be accessing it a lot, speed is not an issue, then yeah, it could be it could be a solution. But yeah, I mean that's basically the alternative to AWS that I know of out there.
Yeah.
so who control this then?
Nobody.
IPFS.
It's the node. So if you want to, basically, you can run up their node, and then you get paid for storing data. That's it.
Yeah. So think of it, Annie, as it's almost like a blockchain, but for data storage. That's not strictly correct, but it's probably close enough that it is decentralized distributed storage, where people on the network take part in it.
So if
So
you've
it's
got,
not owned by Ethereum or
Correct.
Polkadot or anybody.
no, so
Correct.
if you've got extra, basically it's to do with people who have extra data on their laptops, on their PCs, you can just assign, sorry, extra hard space storage. You can assign a part of that storage to it, and then that's how it works. It's so that the data then is duplicated right across the world, whether it's in different continents, different countries, and therefore it's not censorable.
It's not easily getting hacked.
I don't know. Have they been hacked before? I haven't heard anything about it. Most hacks tend to be about tokens, you see, because people want the money.
Mm.
Whereas, I haven't heard any hacks of things where you storage or stuff like that. Most people spend their time going after where they can convert their tokens to hard currencies.
I was going to say as well, the other thing about IPFS is that it's a protocol as opposed to a database.
Okay.
So it's a bit like saying who's hacked HTTP for a website. You can technically do it, but it doesn't actually deliver that much. So I'm sure there must be some security vulnerabilities. But IPFS is generally, I think, one of the two main preferred ways of doing decentralized decentralized storage. And as I say, I think the other one's Swarm, that used to be quite a popular one as well.
So you have, say, legal documentation of a property or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it quite safe putting it there?
I don't offer financial, legal, technology, tax, or cybersecurity advice, I'm afraid.
Annie, what was your original question aimed at? What were you trying to get
because I
to?
think the original question the original question I'm trying to get at is that, because Web3, the idea is that it is so decentralized and it's meant to be free of charge that, people from very low income. I remember there was somebody on this call. It would have nice if he actually joined back again to talk about the project that he was running. He was talking about how he was developing Web3 to help underprivileged children to have access to internet. Now, from our conversation earlier, it isn't easy, isn't it? So first of all, your internet provider would charge you something before you even can access the internet on
Someone's
itself.
got to pay for it. There is
Exactly.
no
Someone
freebie
has
in the
to.
world.
Exactly. And then we say actually, then Web3 is actually free. I was just having to think, is it ever going to be? Because your data storage is going to be somewhere, even if you try to do it immutable, your whatever it is that you're trying to develop, it belong to some company, whether it's Ethereum charging you on
No,
a monthly basis, depending on what it is you
no.
subscribe to them, even
Okay,
if you're
let me
using their
answer.
substrate platform.
Let me answer. The Web3 is a concept, and
Yeah.
the concept is to allow people to own their own data
Mm.
rather than it be owned by large corporations that keep it in silos.
Mhm.
So the concept is that I will have ownership of my own data. If Gary wants to see how many flip-flops I do or whatever I do, then he would come to me via various means and buy my data. And there would be exchanges where I could go and say, here's all Stuart's data about the washing machine, when I turn on lights, where I drive to in my car. That's the concept. And it cuts out the government control. That's the concept. Okay. Question, has it reached that point yet? And the answer is no. We're at about Web 2.2, 2.3. But there's a lot of people that believe we're going to Web 3. They don't quite understand all the concepts and of putting it together worldwide. They have a view, and it's America or it's England or it's Europe. And they forget about the Africas, the Australias, the South Americas, and things like that. Gary,
That's
would you
very,
disagree with that?
no,
Or Ken?
I agree. I think the point that people often forget is that ones and zeros cost money. They cost money to create, they cost money to transmit, and they cost money to store. This is where there are some organizations. World Mobile Token is probably worth checking out, where they're trying to create their own mobile network, in effect, which is token based, and the participants benefit from it. And that you don't have anything that is truly free in the world. The closest we get to free resources is sunshine. And even then,
that is what I meant. Yeah.
and even then, sunshine, when you want to convert that into a form that is usable, then that needs, whether it's solar panel or whatever, which introduces a cost, and then distributing electricity is not free. That incurs. So there's always a cost somewhere, which, as Stuart says, ultimately someone has to pay. Now, whether that's society, government, whatever, is interesting. And again, my thinking around Web3 is it's not about making it free, it's about making it accessible. And it's also about giving you control over your own data. So it flips the paradigm on its head that these days, most data about me is not owned by me. And most data about me, other companies are making money out of, and I'm not getting to see any of that. So the principle of
that's why you've got a free Google.
Yeah. It's the whole thing. Anything that is free means you are the product. Ultimately, it's the old joke. And so, the concept of Web3 is that you end up owning your data, you end up selling your data, you end up in it being able to monetize your own data. Great theory. However, you are going up against the trillion-dollar businesses who are trillion-dollar businesses because they've worked out how they monetize your data, not you. So it's kind of an uphill battle. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but there are many vested interests in keeping it the way it is at the moment, and it's a difficult one to beat.
And also, let me add one rider. Governments have no money. It's your money. Mm-hmm. So all their benefit programs, and we're going to pay for this, we're going to pay for that, it means you're going to pay for it.
It's very true. So maybe we may end up with government grants supporting certain things, which means, as Stuart says, taxpayer money funding it. Or in actual fact, if you understand economics enough, you realise it's not taxpayers funding it, it's taxpayers simply funding the interest on the loans on the money that's being used to pay for it.
That's right.
Which makes the whole thing a farce, which is where crypto comes in
Ponzi
again.
Scheme.
Exactly, because fiat currencies are probably the ultimate Ponzi scheme, for which that was what crypto, one of the reasons it came about originally. So I'm interested.
That's right. All these people who thought they were paying, their pension, and they think there's a pot there and it says Gary Nuttall. It's not. They're spending it every year. And it's like, let's hope we've got enough money to pay Gary when he retires.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's why every few years keep increasing the retirement age so that you never actually get to see it. So anyway, right, folks, that was a really interesting conversation. It's one of the things I love about these sessions, that we end up going off on quite an intellectual journey at times. Well, we did cover quite a few areas there. So we're going to have to close off now, I'm afraid. It's time to finish. So I'll wish everyone thank you, as always, contributions, Stuart and Ken and Annie. Anyone who's watching it afterwards, it's good fun. Come and join us instead. So every Sunday evening, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Come and join us. So folks,
UK time.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. So folks, have a great day.
Yep.
I'll speak to you all again.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Love and peace.